This evening, we continue our Roadside Heritage series of reports showing you some of the great things you can see and learn along Highway 395.
If you recall, last week, John Tyson explained the fiery volcanic heritage of the Sierra. Tonight, we see how that history has led to a modern-day wealth of minerals and mining.
Walk the streets of Bodie, and the ghosts of our mining past seem to walk with you. They whisper of a town 20 times this size, the third largest city in California.
It started out with about 60 different claims up here on the bluff. It resulted in about 32 separate mines. There were 9 stamp mills processing the ore here.
But they also tell a more personal story about life here.
This was called up home for a lot of them, and that it's not just an old abandoned mining town that has some stark looking buildings and stuff lying around, that this was home and it meant a lot to a lot of people.
Bodie was all about gold and silver, but the mineral riches bequeathed by a volcanic past show up in plainer forms too. Sometimes what's mined isn't just ore, but the mineral itself, like the boulders lining the road at the U.S. pumice mine.
The number one use for block pumice has an effect on everyone's life because it is the grill brick that is used to clean grills at every hamburger joint in the world. So block pumice has affected your life if you've had a hamburger.
As pumice occurred as foamy volcanic glass, the solid glass became obsidian, valued by Native Americans for making edge tools, still used for some of the finest surgical knives. Mining built northern Nevada and California, and it still sustains us, even if we don't always see it.
And it's because it's not being done close to the population centers. If there was still mining going on the Comstock, people would be aware of it. But the mining is mostly done in eastern Nevada and Elko and Eureka counties, Lander counties, places out in the rurals. And so we're kind of out of sight, out of mind.
Taylor says mining will continue to be a major economic force in the Sierra. Known reserves will keep miners in business for at least 2 more decades, and by then they may find more. So Bodie doesn't only represent our past. In some ways, it reflects our current mineral wealth and our future.
If Nevada were a country, we would be the 4th largest gold producer in the world.
Among our wealth in the Sierra, tungsten and molybdenum.
Tonight in his journal at 6:30, John Tyson will take us to the mine in the sky, the richest tungsten deposit in the nation.
And remember, you can download audio guides for your next trip along the Highway 395 corridor by logging onto our web channel, KOLO-TV.com. Just look under Day Trippin'. Every Thursday in May, we've been taking on a tour of the Eastern Sierra with some of UNR's top scientists. As we saw on KOLO-8 News Now at 5, mining in the Sierra has had a major impact on our economy and on our culture.
And one mine that has had an impact throughout the entire country is the Pine Creek Tungsten Mine just west of Bishop. To this day, it contains the largest reserve of tungsten in the United States. KOLO-8 News Now's John Tyson has more on the mine in the sky in tonight's journal.
All that glitters isn't necessarily gold. But it was gold miners found in 1916 up here at the top of the world. The gold turned out to be tungsten, a grayish metal that has the highest melting point of any metal known to man. Added to steel, it makes perfect armor-piercing bullets, which in turn made it strategically important to war production.
The history here is phenomenal with its contribution to the war efforts from World War I to World War II to Vietnam and Korea, and it is a truly amazing place.
The Pine Creek mine tunnels 11,600 feet into solid rock. It also has 2 vertical shafts, both 1,300 feet deep. For more than 80 years, the mine turned out the precious tungsten and molybdenum, a metal used in lubricants 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. In the mine's heyday, more than 500 men worked and sweated underground. But as dangerous as underground was, it couldn't compare to the conditions above ground, especially when nature dictated policy. Pete Bellick remembers he's been here since 1966.
Up in this canyon behind me here, going up to the mine, there was 100 feet of snow accumulated. And then the mine was down for a month and a half.
The mine closed down in 2000 when China took over the market. But the mine still holds the country's largest tungsten reserve. Even though the mine is technically shut down, it's actually in mothball status. If they had to open this mine in an emergency, say a military emergency, they could have this thing up and running again in 9 months, making it again the largest operating tungsten mine in the United States. Near Bishop, John Tyson, KOLO-8 News Now.
All this month, Brent and John Tyson have shown us some of our scenic heritage along the Highway 395 corridor through the Eastern Sierra.
And some of the scientific heritage, too. We've seen everything from cold peaks to hot springs, mining to Mono Lake. Tonight, we end our series of reports on Roadside Heritage with a look at the extreme life forms that live in those extreme environments.
Well, they're just a magnificent animal and a magnificent mountain range.
Sierra Nevada bighorn sheep, pregnant ewes. Relatives of the desert bighorn, they went their separate ways an estimated 400,000 years ago.
That means they've actually spent 4 ice ages in the Sierra Nevada living through those extreme vicissitudes in climate.
4 ice ages?
4 ice ages, yes, 400,000 years. We've had about an ice age every 100,000 years.
We don't get to see them very often because the bighorn sheep has learned to survive by seeing us and enemies first.
Their eyesight is like us with binoculars, and so they can't tolerate high vegetation, and they find low vegetation under climatic extremes.
Here's some of the vegetation that thrives in this extreme land. In this case, the White Mountains east of Bishop. This is the ancient bristlecone pine forest. How ancient? Some of these trees had already been alive 2,000 years when Jesus Christ was born. A single plant can hold 4,000 tree rings, and those rings tell researchers quite a story.
As I like to tell people, it's good news and bad news. The good news is it's provided scientists just an unparalleled look back into past climates. And the bad news is there's been some whopper droughts of a severity and a length that we haven't seen here in hundreds of years. It's going to be pretty important to us, but there is evidence, there's clear evidence that there's been some pretty severe droughts in the past 30 and 40-year droughts.
Still, the bristlecone pine survives, partly by conserving moisture in a growing season as short as 2 months, and by holding on to its needles.
They show us temperatures that have risen and lowered by the tree line moving up and down. They can show us past precipitation amounts, and they're very spiritual. We get people every year that come up on a spiritual journey to see these oldest trees in the world.
You can see why. John Tyson and I saw many wonders on our trip down the Eastern Sierra, and you can too in a day trip from Reno. Scientists from the University of Nevada, Reno and other institutions have compiled audio travel notes to guide you. You can pick them up at roadside locations along the Roadside Heritage Corridor, or you can download them all on our web channel, KOLO-TV.com. Just look for Day Trippin'.
That just is a wonderful plan. You know, it's an inexpensive way to share a wonderful weekend with the family.
And you can learn an awful lot on those little audio programs.
Excellent. Well, I know you had tons of fun.
Yes.